Testing 1, 2, 3. This is actually my first time using this type of equipment, so I'm excited.
I'm excited too.
Okay. So would you just want to just state your name and what your job is here at Wall Township Public Schools?
My name is Kaylin Gilvary. I am working through the Office of Special Services on the Child Study team at the intermediate school. I am their social worker on the team, and I also hold a clinical license. I'm a licensed clinical social worker outside of the building.
I'm not as interesting. But I'm Tiffany Steiner. I'm the Director of Intervention Services and Student Wellness through the district. I served as a guidance counselor, an assistant principal, and an acting principal. So now I'm in a position where I've combined all of those skills and I'm able to do things for mental health and wellness.
I'm Isabella Sanfilippo. I'm a student at Communications High School, and I'm also a Girl Scout. So this is my interview portion in order to complete the application of my Gold Award. And if you've been following this podcast for a little while, you know that Operation Peachtree was an organization I created earlier in the year. And I was just walking along the bike path one time, and there was this tree there, and it has a bunch of tags with wishes. And I saw one, and it said, I hope that my mom stays cancer-free and stays healthy. And that one just kind of hit home with me because my mom had cancer. And she's totally good now, so I thank God for that every day. But I realized that the tree had so much potential to help people and just be able to have people have like an outlet to just say whatever they wanted. So when I saw that there were no more tags left, I was like, how do I make this a digital thing so it like you can never run out of tags? And I was like, oh my gosh, like you can just do an Instagram page. It can be something as simple as that. So that is kind of my idea. I want to actually also plant more trees with a QR code to the Instagram and link resources and like maybe even like a Google Doc or this episode possibly, because we're going to get into a lot of things about mental health and some questions that you might be dying to know. I know that I'm dying to know a lot of these questions. And yeah, we can get right into it. So the first question is, what classifies as poor mental health in teenagers? Would it be something like stress or something more like large scale like anxiety or depression?
We were talking before about mental health and wellness, and I think that anything that gets in the way, whether it is a depression, it's stress, anxiety, it's something situational that gets in the way of us functioning to our full potential is problematic and is a symptom that we may need to get some type of self-care or get help and resources from others. So it's when you start functioning at your best self is when mental health, becomes an issue that needs to be addressed.
I also think that when we think about mental health, it can be a very taboo subject. And I want us to start looking at mental health just like it's another branch or another avenue like physical health. Yeah. If we get a cold, we go to the doctor, we get medicine, there's no judgment, there's no nothing. We know that there's going to be symptoms, right? Our throat's going to be scratchy, we might have a fever. So if we start to have mental health symptoms, it's the same thing. We have to look at what are the symptoms, and we'll get into that because, I've previewed some of your questions, but what are they? And then how do we treat it? So it's not just this mysterious thing. It's actual physical symptoms that the body experiences just inside their mind. Okay, so I want us to think of it that way, that in the realm of wellness, you have physical wellness, you have mental wellness, you have spiritual wellness, and we go and do different things for each one of those topics. So we're going to be in that kind of realm today. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
That's really interesting. And I really like the cold analogy because I feel like a lot of grown-ups and even teenagers, they just think like, oh, I'm just stressed out. Like it's not something too big, but something as little as a cold could be like the flu or something like that.
And to take care of that cold, it turns into bronchitis, then it turns into pneumonia, and then we need the hospital. But somebody say, oh, I'm sad or depressed. Oh, just shake it off. You can't just shake things off like that. So I just like to use that as the preface of how we're going to look at mental health today.
I really like that.
Good.
Yes, very good.
We're all good. It's a good team here.
So what are some of the causes of poor mental health in teenagers?
So,
Or anyone?
I mean, definitely jumping. I think we need to know that mental health is on the rise, unfortunately. I put some quotes in here, 4 in 10 students can fall to mental health issues in their adolescent years. Same as 1 in 5, that's about 22% can experience suicidal thoughts. So when we talk about that cold going all the way to a hospital level, kids are experiencing a lot more now, in different ways. Not in that they haven't before, but we have a lot of different environmental climate issues going on. We're talking about wars, we're talking about terrorism, we're talking about climate control, we're talking about families and different types of families, and we're talking about different types of schools. These are all concerns and stressors that we face on a day-to-day basis, right? But I think when we look at what does it look like for poor mental health, or what are some of the behaviors we need to look at, correct? It's those risky behaviors that we as adolescents sometimes tend to engage in. It's okay, I hate the word normal, but it's typical to engage in a risky behavior here and there. But if you start engaging in risky behaviors like drinking, driving when you shouldn't be, partying, dangerous behaviors that could cause injury to yourself or to somebody else over a long period of time, that's where you have to start and say, why am I engaging in these behaviors? Same with pressure, perfectionism, achievement. We see a lot more of anxiety on the rise because kids have put themselves into a position where they just can't fail. And there's nothing wrong with failure. So if you really look at substances being a risky behavior, engaging in risky behaviors, risky sexual behaviors, even, I hope we can say the sex word on here, increased anxiety, perfectionism, safety concerns, all of that are real issues about what it looks like or what there would be symptoms of. Do you have anything you want to add to that?
I just, what resonates with me too is that right now the world is so different. And when we have kids who are so connected to technology and social media, and there's these ideas on social media of what is perfection, there's, people post things about these perfect worlds where everybody's smiling and everybody's liking things. And it just gives us a sense that that's true life. Right. And it's really very far from true life. So I see young kids getting disillusioned because they think that they should be feeling those things. They should have all those likes. They should be looking a certain way. And that's just not what life is.
And I think there's certain groups that we really need to pay attention to. When we're talking about mental health, there are certain groups of people that are more affected for many different reasons, but some of the major ones are like our LGBTQ community, acceptance, understanding, patience, that goes hand in hand. But sometimes we have a world that isn't. So they have a lot of issues that can swirl around in that mental health. Same with racial groups, racial anything, right? Even religious groups. We have a world right now that it's really tough. Even African American students, believe it or not, are more likely to attempt suicide than any other race. That's a fact that's hard to kind of sometimes process when we think about everybody being on equal playing fields, right? So I just want us to also know that there are certain target groups that when you work in mental health, you have to be very aware of too, because there's a lot of more in-depth stressors, but everybody is just at the same risk as everybody else, meaning it doesn't play favorites, and it doesn't mean if you're not a member of the LGBTQ that you're not going to be affected. You still can be by mental health.
I kind of also wanted to bounce off the idea of like social media and stuff like that, because I saw something somewhere where it said social media is a highlight reel. And I think that it's so true, because it just puts all of your best moments. Obviously, you're not going to put a picture of you like crying to a rom-com in your bed eating chocolate at like 12 in the morning. You're going to put like when you went on vacation or when you went to a really cool concert or something like that.
I think it's those filtered moments that we post, those filtered moments that we kind of put out there that we're either proud of or we think we need to be proud of. But sometimes those real moments we keep to ourselves, but it's in keeping those to ourselves that we're not projecting the full light of what social media is, right? And I know we'll get into a lot of that because social media plays a huge role. But I think with today's teenagers, social media plays the biggest role because this is the generation that grew up with that smartphone in their hand, living on social media, and there's no judgment there. I read something in an article that it was equated to when we got TVs. Now, that was before my time. But when TVs first came out and they were able to watch TV, there was this huge uptick of everybody staying home and watching TV. Yeah. And then people were like, it's ruining the world. It's taking away our socialization, our activity, our social, our community. It's just a different method of TV. So we've faced this before. It's just how we handle it and how we talk about it and how we deal with it. But it's a huge aspect.
What's something that I noticed is when you ask like a little kid like to pretend they're on the phone, usually you go like that. Well, they can't see that on the podcast,
right.
but you like
that little phone thing to your ear,
yeah,
to your mouth. Right.
Like you have like your two fingers out and then like that. But now kids like just put their whole hand to their head, which is so crazy.
It's like I watched a couple of those TikToks where you have them say like, show me what it means to hang up. And I would do the hanging up the receiver. And then now kids just hit the button. And I'm like, what are they hitting? Oh my goodness, I'm so old. So it's different communication style. It's different emojis. It's like, it's a whole different thing, but it also presents that FOMO also, right? What is that? Fear of missing out? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Being on social media, I think it's everybody wants to be involved. You no longer get to go home and disconnect. School's still there with you, right? All day long. It's hard. But I think that's a very cute point.
I had an episode on FOMO actually because I feel like it's just something so huge in today's world, especially with social media, because you can see when someone's hanging out without you, whether you weren't invited or you just couldn't make it that day. Right. And it hits home with a lot of people, and it's like...
There's a new acronym, though. Probably not new. I'm probably dating myself. It's not the FOMO of missing out. It's the wanting to miss out. So what is that called? You're going to have to erase this because I'm not going to remember. But instead of fear of, it's like embracing it. Like, I want to miss out. But I don't remember. I'm going to have to remind myself what it is. I'm going to look it up, but keep going.
That's interesting, though. I've never heard of, like...
There's a new term, and I'll figure it out.
You know what's so interesting about it too, though, is like with social media, when you weren't invited to something, sometimes you didn't know. Yeah. Now it's so in front of you. Ooh.
Joy of missing out.
JOMO.
It's almost like self-care.
Yeah. Joy of missing out.
I
Yeah.
don't mean to cut you off.
No. But and that's kind of heavy for kids too, because throughout ages, like there will always be times when we'll be left out of something, right? Mm-hmm. But for it to be something where we have an idea of like a relationship in our life that's so important, and you think you're a big part of someone's life, and then you see pictures, and like in every place they're at, you're not invited to be those places. It sometimes makes you face a reality that you didn't necessarily have to face 20 years ago when everybody wasn't online. So it definitely creates a whole level of stress.
I think FOMO was something that last year, like, it hit me hard because, like, I never really cared about not getting invited things, but then, like, when you get to high school, things start changing. Mm-hmm. But I, like, had to realize for myself, if you're not getting the invite and people don't, like, necessarily, not that they don't want you there, but they don't care enough to invite you, or, like, if people aren't going to appreciate you when you're there, you don't have to.
I think you start to appreciate the quality over quantity, right? Yeah. And that's how many events do I need to go to, or what are the important events for people in my life? And that's a mature, or getting to be a mature adult, understanding that. And you tend to go through that starting in high school. So I'm glad you're realizing that too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. My next question is, what role do parents play in mental health?
Parents, well, being a parent is probably the hardest job. So, because the majority of good parents, right, they're so invested in their children. They know what you're good at sometimes before you know what you're good at. You know, they hurt when you hurt. They say there's a saying like you're only as happy as your happiest child, right? Because when your child's not happy, you're not happy, you know? So I think parents have that lens of loving you and wanting and willing to do anything to help their children. So getting parents on board when you're having difficulty is just, it's just makes a situation so different, you know, much more manageable and treatable. And, you know, so I think that they play a really important role in keeping our kids healthy.
I think also, I truly agree with you with that. I think one of the major or most important things is communication. I think you having open lines of communication with your kids has to be priority. Providing open and honest communication. You know, kids are smart. Teenagers are smart. We know when we're not telling them the truth. They know when we're kind of fibbing. And that's age appropriate. I mean, I'm not going to go into a third grader or to a 4-year-old and tell them the story of, life creation, but we are going to be age appropriate in what they can handle. But I think a part of being a parent is you're a parent. You're not a friend. You provide healthy boundaries, and you can be friends with your kids, but the moment you lose sight of those boundaries and helping them learn and grow, and we don't have to shield them from pain and sorrow, and we certainly protect them, but we have to be okay to make mistakes and let our kids make mistakes. And I think in mental health, we have to be there because it's a scary time. Just like when you don't feel well physically, mom's there to make the chicken soup, right? Or mom's there to make the doctor's appointment, or dad or aunt or grandma or whoever you live with. I think we have to be able to count on them in all times, but know that the boundaries and what they're giving us and what they're allowing us to do has to be in the realm of we're keeping you safe and healthy. That's my opinion of and also be involved in your kid's life. Know what they're doing, because when we talk more about some warning signs, if we're not involved in our kids' lives, how are we going to know if they're starting to go down the wrong path? So it's being an active participant in your child's life.
My mom drives me literally everywhere. She is one of the most involved parents ever. So
gold star for her.
Yeah, and my dad too. He drives me to field hockey. Yeah. I was just so blessed with such amazing parents.
Yeah. Do you have family dinner?
On Sundays, yeah.
See, it doesn't have to be every day. It doesn't, but there needs to be a connection. There needs and activities. I'm sure even if you hang out, watch a game on TV, or there's something you do where there's a common bond and you're sharing life experiences. Yeah. That's what you want to do with your family.
Yeah, I agree. Mm-hmm. My dad went to Villanova, so we watch the basketball games every time they're on.
Mm-hmm. March Madness, here we go.
Yeah.
I'm very excited.
Yeah. Okay, so the top asked question by teenagers was, how do I tell somebody that my friend is really depressed or struggling without making them hate me or betraying their trust? And I think that this kind of goes with the parents thing, because when you do tell someone, it's usually that person's parent. So
I think you need to be able to recognize the warning signs, or you need to recognize what are the symptoms. And I know you probably have them. We don't need to go into all of that. And that's, different for everybody. Everybody's symptoms look different. But what I say and what we taught is, one is always tell me more. We learned that from Mental Health Association. Always ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid of presenting or confronting your friend if you have a concern. But I think the biggest rule of thumb is I'd rather have a friend mad at me that I sought out help for them than not have that friend at all. So if sometimes we have to tell our friends that this may you may ask me to promise to not share if they're having thoughts of wanting to hurt themselves, or they think they're depressed or their anxiety. But a lot of times we have to say, I'm not an expert in this field. I wouldn't know how to cure bronchitis. That's why I go to an expert. So I need to rely on your parents or the school or a doctor or even just a trusted adult to get more help for you because you mean that much. I think we have to not be afraid to hurt their feelings to make sure they're okay. And really, really, once they get through it, they can see that you were a good friend there. Do you have anything you want to add to that? Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I think that a lot of the time when people see their friend struggling, they don't want to like upset them or make them angry because obviously like you don't want anyone upset at you, especially at this age, because you just want acceptance.
But it's being direct too. It's saying like, Miss Steiner, I've noticed that you've been sad, and I've noticed that you haven't come out to the football games lately, or your posts have been a little bit darker lately, or you're not calling every day, and pointing out the symptoms, being direct. You don't want to be like, are you okay? I don't know if you're okay. You want to be direct. You want to point out what you're observing, and then simply say, how can I help? What can I do? I'm here for you. And I think sometimes kids forget that they can say that. And they can say, I don't have the answer. But together we can find it.
That's beautiful. Thank you.
And it's okay to say, too, that, like with some kids and the things that they say is, what you're saying scares me. Mm-hmm. And if it scares me, I really do have to talk to an adult about it because it's a heavy lift having to support someone who is definitely engaging in behaviors that are beyond the scope of how you can help, and that's the ultimate goal is helping you, the people that you love, helping the people that you love.
I think it comes down to empathy. That's a huge word we need to always remember, and that's understanding how others feel in a situation. Validating feelings. I say to all my kids that I work with and all my different, careers that every feeling is valid. It's how we handle those feelings that we need to be concerned with. And then another term that we use a lot in the counseling arena is called holding space. So holding space means if your friend is crying and upset and really upset and needs to be emotional, we don't need to fix them at that moment. Yeah. We need to hold space and say, I'm just going to sit here and cry with you. Yeah. I'm going to allow you to be upset and not tell you to change. Because sometimes that's all they need. They just need somebody to be with them in their sadness, in their anxiety. And that's what we do as friends. We're not solving it. We're just holding space, being with them in a weak moment. So I think those are ways we can handle our friends, and especially teenagers in high schools can do that. How many times do you go hang out at your girlfriend's house when you're curled in the bed and watching a movie and eating popcorn just because somebody doesn't feel well or somebody's had broken up with their boyfriend or girlfriend, and you just need to be there. It's just a matter of being there.
Also, just like, I'll bring the ice cream. We can turn on some movie. Like,
bring the spoons and the tub. Don't even bring a bowl. But that's what it's just holding space and being there. Yeah.
And I think that in those moments, there's like even hidden beauty too. Like,
absolutely.
It's just, those are some of the most sentimental moments and with your friends and all that stuff.
There's times in my life where I can stop and count on somebody who has been there for me and has done nothing other than holds me when I cried. Or shared in the sheer joy of my tears, and I didn't have to say anything. So it's just being enough of a friend to say you mean something and what you're going through is important, and it may not be happening to me, but I want to be there and witness with you, and I want to hold your hand through it. So, and that's the same when we talk about struggling and mental health. Just like you would visit somebody at the hospital if they broke their arm, you're going to visit somebody wherever they are in their darkest moment and still provide support.
This kind of goes with it. What do you think is the best thing that you could do to support teenagers suffering from poor mental health?
So I think, I personally think when we talk about kids who are suffering from mental health, besides looking at the warning signs, we go back and we realize that not only could it be their emotions that are affected, their behaviors, but we look at as working in a school to academic performance, attendance, substance use. They could turn to using substances to mask or kind of self-medicate themselves, taking those risky behaviors. So those are all things that can cause issue, right? We can see those. I think the best thing you can do, though, is to check in, be there, be supportive, ask questions, listen. Sometimes we don't stop to hear what the other person is telling us. We want to hear what we want to hear. And I think that's one of the hardest skills, is to listen and be open to whatever they're saying. Well, you can't be that sad, or that can't be that hard to do, or a 95 is good enough when somebody needed 100. We have to be non-judgmental and really understand that what they're going through is valid to them at the moment. I think we encourage them to speak. We encourage them to find people who are supportive and places that are supportive to them. But most importantly, know that it's not something that's going to go away on its own. And they deserve to be treated like a human being and get help. I don't know if you have anything you want to add to that. I mean, perfect. I think there you go. We're passing the mic.
Even like what you were saying, like with Tell Me More, like just being there and listening. And I think it was my Spanish teacher, like one of the first days of school, she said, usually when people are talking, we think of our responses in our heads before they even finish their sentence, and you can miss so much in like those last couple words.
Absolutely, because you're already going on to the next, and that's just how fast our world goes now. Yeah. But if we stop and really take time, listen, we're going to hear things that we need to, right?
Things that could really help.
That's wisdom.
Our friends. Yeah.
Right? That's the whole definition of wisdom, is being able to just stop yourself and be present for other things and notice other things. That's like the wisdom and beauty of life. Right. Like that's how you find it.
And it's being there. It's being willing to, well, I had to go get treatment, or I saw a counselor when I didn't feel good. And it doesn't mean you have to see a counselor for the rest of your life, or it could be a pastor, it could be a rabbi, it could be a coach. We just want to encourage and say, if you're nervous, I'll go with you. Yeah. You have a friend here. I think when we talk about friends and how to support each other, you're walking together through the journey. They don't feel alone.
I feel like a lot of times in school, we're always told, like, go to a trusted adult or a guidance counselor. But do you think that there's value in confiding in a peer, even if they don't always know all of the answers?
I think it's a good question. It's a good question. I think there's value in peer relationship and peer trust and expressing how you feel. I think there's also value and responsibility in being that peer to say, I don't have all the answers. And even though I can hold that and I can listen and I can be here, I owe it to you to find somebody who can help you. Right? Yeah. Because there is responsibility still in knowing that just as long as me and you know what's happening, I don't want you to have to ever carry my burden. Yeah. Does that make sense? And not that your friend's a burden, but you're not in charge and you can't save anybody. And I don't mean that rudely. I mean that we have to be acknowledging that I trust you and I so understand that we're talking about this, and let's keep it between us. But now I think we're crossing a line and we need to get somebody else involved. Yeah. I think there's a difference in that too, though, right? And I think as an administrator, you can relay that even when it comes to staff, and we have professional responsibilities, and I think friends need to have responsibilities towards each other. Like, you wouldn't say, oh, you broke your arm, I'm just going to hang out with you and I'll put a Band-Aid on it and we'll be okay, that way nobody finds out. Well, your arm's still broken, right? So that's how I look at it, but I'm sure,
I feel the same way. And it's I think everyone has a different level of health in their own life. Mm-hmm. And so if you're in a place where you're suffering and your best friend is suffering there right with you because they're having their own set of problems, you might not be able to support each other in ways that are going to move you both ahead. And it's okay to still support each other, but I think you just have to know when it needs to be pushed forward to somebody else to get involved. And I think there's no shame too. Like, you got to know when your bucket's full right? Like you got to know, even as an adult, you need to know when, there's too much on your plate that you can't take on another thing and continue to be healthy for yourself or for your family. And
that's where self-care comes in.
Yeah, self-care is so important, so when you're depending on your friends and stuff, I think you just have to be authentic, that when there's things that are over your capacity, because either you're just not all there to be able to support, or it's just way out of your scope of experience, the bravest thing to do is say, I love you, I adore you, and we need to go find somebody who can help.
Because I think that accountability of being real and honest. When we tell somebody, oh, I promise I'll never say anything, we've already set ourselves up, right? So it's making sure we don't make promises we can't keep, and knowing our limitations. And the limitations don't mean we don't love and care and support. It means exactly what Mrs. Steiner says. We need to find the appropriate, right? Yeah. So I think that's big when it talks to peer involvement, peer support. Think about that as adults. What are the such common peer supports are what? AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, NA, right? Al-Anon for these are peer support groups that help people through. Yeah. But you have to stop and say, they're adults and they know their limitations and they have books and literature and stuff. You know what I mean? As teenagers and as adolescents, we're still growing and learning ourselves, right? It doesn't mean we're not valid in our feelings and that we're not important and we don't hold such an important piece.
I think it's important too, like so often, why do kids go to other kids? Because there's this level of understanding, because you share same experiences, same, relationships with people, so there's a level of understanding that you may not find from telling me a problem or telling Miss Gilvary a problem. So I think it's genuinely important, especially when you talk about like groups, like for children who are grieving, who've lost a parent. It doesn't feel normal to anybody else except another child who might be grieving in the same way. And so there's something to be said about those experiences and being able to share something with someone who has they understand it differently than everybody else. But I also think it's important, like when you go to groups like AAs and stuff like that, there are people there too who are guiding the discussions, who are leading it, who are keeping it and making it safe. Right. So, there's a place. There's definitely a place for peer help and peer support. And there's definitely a place where you have to know when to pump the brakes and say, we need somebody else.
And think about all of the online supports now, too. So what's great is being able to support your friend and say, hey, let's go check out itgetsbetter.org, the Trevor Project, Second Floor. All of these agencies and all of these people set up blogs and just like you're talking about to offer support, but I also offer when is it time to seek out more help. So I think that's just really knowing the difference.
And getting the right support. That's the one thing too that I notice in our world. Like there's so much out there and that's accessible to us and it's great stuff. But sometimes kids don't go to the reputable stuff. And that's when you can see people victimized, right? Yeah. Because especially when you're vulnerable. We don't want to be victimized in unsafe positions.
On our parents and our trusted adults to make sure we're getting to the right people.
I definitely think that with the new age of social media too, it can be hard to have adults fully understand what's happening. Because
we don't even know how to use the phone.
I don't have an Instagram.
Even if I said something to my mom or something like that, she'd be like, we just didn't have to deal with that when we were younger. She kind of like what you were saying, held herself accountable. I don't know about that. That's crazy because there's just so many things online. Oh yeah, 100%.
But it also doesn't create a barrier, but it does create almost an avoidance to want to have to figure that out, right? So I didn't mean to cut you off, but yeah.
Even with my grandpa, in the car, like he uses Siri, but he has like a very thick Italian accent, so he's like, Siri, Siri. It's the craziest. No, yeah. And then he'll be like, why is she not turning on? And then I'll just let me look it up. No, it's.
But I mean, knowing that your Instagram or anything is going to be checked out by the colleges you may be applying to, 100%. Or you may be in a job, and 10 years from now, what you posted in second grade is going to be pulled back up. And I don't think we fully understand. We understand, but we don't fully realize the pressure that causes you guys as teenagers now, because we didn't grow up with that. We could go out and make a mistake and there'd be no trace of it. You know what I mean? Now it's all over. So it's a different set of rules, and that's where we have to go and learn from people who understand. And that's the value in peer support, I think, because you guys understand. Yeah. And a lot of times I'll be working with kids and I'll be like, teach me. Yes. Help me understand so I can then help in return.
I think like even like looking on social media, like I've seen so many people post pictures with like red solar cups, and it's like
you know what that means?
Kids make mistakes all the time.
You're supposed to, yeah.
All the time. And the one thing I always caution parents is like we have these strong feelings and ideas of what we want our kids to do and not to do. But we also have to understand that kids make mistakes, and we don't want them to be afraid to tell us those things that we are like, never do this. Well, when that does happen, would you want to know as a parent so that you could protect your child and help try and manage the situation? Of course you would. But that's, that's a difficulty because it's just, like I said, there's could be big mistakes with big consequences, and kids need to know too that sometimes you're going to have to own it, but it's better to own it with a parent who can help and manage it better than owning it on their own or living afraid that it's going to be exposed, you know.
And all of it is captured on film, like everything. Yeah, it's crazy.
It's hard. Yeah. Do you know, and it's really hard too. Like there's certain things, and this sounds ridiculous as a grown woman, but I won't post. I won't really post much because there's times where I worry that someone's going to post something negative about it or something. Like I always, kind of being a little bit of a public figure and stuff like that, not every interaction. I make mistakes too. Not every parent may have agreed with something I did, and sometimes they might be full on right and I may have been wrong. But it's hard. It's hard to like have your name out there for something when you just would hate to see some negative comments come in too, And that's as a grown woman, I feel that way.
But I think that's where studies and statistics are now coming into play. And I know it was one of your questions that you had looked at, like, how does social media play a role in our mental health, and how does it hurt us at times, right? And I think living in the social media lens, talk about FOMO, talk about the perfect picture, the filtered picture, the how many likes did I get, how many friends do I have, all of this, you probably could say it so much better than me because, again, your world, not mine. Do I have a Facebook? Yeah. Do I post silly pictures of my nieces but I don't truly have to live on social media. I'm an adult and I have my friends and they're not going to judge me. But growing up, I think that's what's happening with a lot of our younger kids, right? Do you see that now, like middle school? I work in a middle school right now, and it's social media runs the show over there. Who has what, and who's on this, and who friended who, and who blocked who, and who wrote on this, and who made the anonymous post. And I think it's really hard when we talk about self-esteem, self-confidence, understanding our own bodies, understanding who we are and how we change over time, to be kind to ourselves. And social media has a very harsh lens.
100%.
Yeah.
I think like definitely even YouTube, like my brother has an iPad, he's 9, he goes on YouTube shorts all the time. Like there's still comments, there's still stuff like that. It's not like he's posting anything.
I mean, I would be hysterical if somebody even was like, that's an ugly shirt. And that's not even like, people are on there being keyboard warriors. I don't even want to talk about what they're saying. Do you know what I mean? So I give a lot of credit to today's youth because they have thicker skin, a better understanding of what they need to do to survive it. But in that same breath, it saddens me that they have to be like that already, you know?
I mean, I made a whole episode too about how much I don't like social media. Like, I think it's just such a negative atmosphere. But at the same time, like for branding purposes, like with my podcast, I have an Instagram. I have to have an Instagram if I want to have the outreach, especially with if I wanted
Used
to.
appropriately.
Exactly.
Used appropriately and through the lens of kindness and through the lens of empowering. I mean, I have an Instagram. Now, tell me if I know how to work my Instagram. I don't. But most of my Instagram feed, using the right word, is that it? The feed is filled with mental health quotes, body positivity, because you know what I use it for? I know how to send them to my nieces. So what I found is the more, and they have seen this on social media statistics, what you like, what you engage in, and if it's positive, uplifting, empowering, the more you're going to get in your feed. Is that true? Like I've noticed that even on my TikTok, I'm on like cooking TikTok one day, and the next day I'm on book talk but if we use it for good, it's a beautiful platform because it can reach everybody. But we're always going to have people who mistreat it, and we have to know how to defend it or defend ourselves from the hurtfulness of it, right?
Yeah, and then something else too, if like you like what you kind of relate to. Like if people are suffering and they're liking all of these darker posts,
Oh my God, I put it in here.
yeah,
Absolutely.
that's all you're going to get on your feed is just all negative outlooks, negative videos. And
You're
stuff like that.
absolutely right. And that is right along with the data of today, of even that term, liking what you like or following those certain types of posts. It's almost like we have to be responsible enough. We put into the world what we want to get out of the world. And if we put out a lot of negativity, we're not going to get a lot of positivity back, right? But that's where our friends come into play. We embrace ourselves. We have to find our passions. We have to really be okay with exploring outside the box. Make mistakes. It's okay. But also when we need help, there's help to be had. And there's plenty of ways to do that. And I think that's important, and self-care is important relating to social media and to the teenagers of today. I think that gets lost a little bit, the importance of self-care.
What are some examples of self-care?
Oh, there's tons.
Razzle dazzle ice cream.
There you go. Razzle dazzle ice cream. That was specific.
That very
was
specific.
Very
That's
specific.
when it's a really bad day, we treat ourselves to ice cream.
I think think about this, anything from taking a break to mindfulness to breathing, right? To taking a walk, using exercise, using activity, to family engagement, to peer involvement. That's all self-care. Bubble baths. Like, come on, right? Like vacation, our favorite foods, stretching.
A big stretcher too. And giving yourself, like some of those things that may not be the healthiest, like ice cream, but in moderation, knowing that there's certain days that are just ice cream worthy days.
Like, come on.
And like enjoying
For me,
it.
it's a funnel cake, but disconnecting too. There's something important about being able to turn off the phone and quiet your mind and be okay with who you are. You have to be alone in a room and know you can manage that. Reading a book, going to magazines. What is your passion? What are your dreams? Step out of that box. Find your connections. Self-care is anything that makes you feel valued and important and recharge. That's the biggest thing. You need to recharge. And I think just like our phones need battery, we need to charge sometimes. But it could be anything.
Yeah. And you know, it really depends on the kind of person you are too. Like your makeup and your thinking. You know, I'll give an example, when something troubles me, it's 24/7 on my mind. So I don't need to breathe, because breathing, I still keeps coming. I have to do something that keeps my mind busy. So I crochet. I learned how to crochet. Yes,
I like it.
Yes, you should see. I have sweaters. My little boy has sweat. Everybody has a sweater, but like, because that's what I need. Like, I need something to really keep me busy and I should say not just busy, distracted.
Yeah.
You know, so like for some people it's about that quiet, and for other people it's like, what's a healthy distraction? You know, so knowing what makes you tick.
I think some people, that's a really good point, Mrs. Steiner, because some people think self-care only has to be meditating on the floor. Well, if I was to try to get on the floor and meditate, one, I'd probably fall asleep in 2 minutes, and two, I'd probably be so frustrated. Not that I do like to meditate, but the quietness sometimes is too quiet for me. What do I need to do? I need to turn on my music. I need to read a book. I need to cook in the kitchen. I need to go play with my dog. Active. That's why self-care can be anything as long as it is valued, you're recharging, it's positive, and there's no pressure.
Yeah. I think something that's interesting too is like with the introvert extrovert kind of thing, like some people some people get their energy from being with other people, but some people recharge by being alone.
Absolutely. Some people want that. Let me hide under the covers. Yeah. Let me just watch a movie. Let me, Netflix all week long. That's okay. But again, those warning signs when we don't come out of that hibernation, or we can't stop eating the tubs of ice cream, or we can't. So it's that healthy balance of knowing when we need self-care and when we need support.
And it can be very extreme like that. Like sometimes we we worry about the person who won't come out of bed, right? But we don't worry about the person who
works 1,200 jobs and
who won't come home, or who won't stop who just can't settle because they like the distraction of being with others, to the point where it gets in the way of taking care of responsibilities.
Or they're studying until 3 a.m. and getting 2 hours of sleep, getting up, going to practice, going to school, coming home, going back to practice, going back to school. So it's those kind of balance and understanding that it can be two different spectrums, right? The yin and the yang of it all.
I have a very interesting story. So I was a very competitive gymnast when I was in high school, and when I got an injury and I no longer did gymnastics because I couldn't do it anymore, I like had a really hard time resetting, because I was so accustomed to being so busy that it was the loss of something I enjoyed doing, but it was also the learning how to be okay with not all of that running. It was a definite adjustment. It was very interesting. I was about your age, and it was just this time where I learned something about myself that,
Injuries are so tough too, because it's something you love. It's like, it's not just a sport. It's your passion. It's everything.
It's like your way of life.
Exactly.
And if you're not being a gymnast, then who are you being? And that's what I found. I had a whole identity of what it was like to be in that world, and then having to say, you know what, that was just, I so shortchanged myself because it was really that much of my identity. But we see that nowadays too. Ms. Gilvary and I talk all the time about how much we love our job and how important it becomes. And it is, but it's just a piece of our identity. We're also like pretty good friends and pretty cool people to hang out beyond here, or we're mothers, or we're sisters, or we're daughters, we're other things. I know. So
I feel like we covered a lot of all of the questions.
You had really good questions.
Thank
I'm going to
you.
be very honest with you. One thing, you had a question of what do I think about taking mental health days? I love them. I think it's important to, if you need a mental health day, it's just like if you have a sick day. You don't abuse it. It's within balance. It's what you need. But there are some days when we need to put our mental health a priority. I think that is so true.
I agree.
And I don't think there's one answer for everybody. Like when we talk about what's the solution or how is it going to help, it's not like you can give an antibiotic and know it's going to kill the bacteria. I don't even know if it kills bacteria. I don't know what antibiotics do. Anyways, so there's tons of different treatment options, from counseling to sports groups to activities to to hobbies, to treatments like counseling therapy, talk therapy, art therapy, dance therapy, dog music therapy, dog therapy, group therapy, inpatient hospitalizations, outpatient hospitalizations, medication, vitamins, nutrients, healthy eating. There's not a one fit all. So that's where you want to remember that everybody is unique. And that's the beauty of it. But it takes time and patience. And if one thing doesn't work, don't give up. It takes time. But everybody is important enough and deserves happiness that I think it's mental health. There should be no judgment. It's just like anything else. And we need to be compassionate.
Definitely.
That's my opinion. So I loved your questions. I thought the idea of this tree, it wasn't called, what was it called?
Operation
A peace tree,
Yeah.
where people, and my understanding is that can leave or take what they need,
Exactly.
is beautiful. And having it be digital or online, I can't imagine the people you can reach.
Yeah.
And I want to be the first to like donate a tree or whatever it has. Like, it is so inspiring
Thank you.
that a teenager cares that much about her fellow teenagers. And I want to wish you well on that, because I think it's a beautiful idea and the world will be a better place for it.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Gives me a lot of hope.
Absolutely.
It does.
Absolutely.
Gives me a lot of hope when I see kids in your generation think this way and be progressive and be creative and be empathetic. I say, wow, job well done to mom and dad, but job well
Absolutely.
done for us.
Job well done to Will Township for
Yep.
raising and supporting such a beautiful concept and a beautiful soul.
Yep.
And there are just so many businesses and organizations around here that are so willing to help out and so willing to
Just keep spreading that love and that acceptance, because we don't need perfect. We just need to be us.
There's just such it's not a tight knit community, it's a welcoming community. They will it's just
Yes.
very accepting, and especially if you're passionate about something, there's so many good people in this town that want to help you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's the example we need. So thank you for being that example. And we look forward to seeing the amazing things you're going to accomplish and have accomplished.
Thank you.
So I was excited to do this. So thank you very much.
Yeah,
Thank
good
you.
job.
Yeah, you were amazing.
Thank you so much.